session today. And I'll be calling on stage Mr. Victor Oluwole from Business Insider. The title of this panel session today, a round of applause, please. So the title of the panel session today is The Next Tech Frontier, Building for the Next Billion.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Victor Oluwole, and I am the head and editor at Business Insider Africa. Business Insider Africa is one of the media partners for the Lagos Startup Week, and we're excited to contribute our quota to the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem in Africa. So to kickstart this session, I would like to invite on stage the panelists, starting with Mr. Akong. He is the co-CEO and president of Opay, Nigeria. I would also be inviting to the stage Nefey Etomi. I hope I got that right. Nefey is the strategy and finance specialist at Paystack. And I also have with us here today Oluwole Omoleye. She is the head of legal and compliance and branch international. Thank you. Okay. As many of you are quite aware, today's session will be discussing the next tech frontier, anticipating change and building for the next billion. Basically, what we want to discuss, opportunities in Africa, the next $1 billion startup, the next $1 billion idea, why fintech is leading the ecosystem in terms of funding, what other industries, what they can learn from the fintech industry itself. And I'm sure many of you have questions that you would also like to ask these distinguished people. Many of them here are veterans, and I'm sure any question that you direct at them, they are very, very confident in giving you the answer that you need. So let's get started. I would like to start with the ladies. My first question, around this conversation goes to Nefey, right? So in your position as the strategy and finance specialist at Paystack, one of the things you focus on is expansion into new markets, right? But there's this conversation around Africa being the next frontier market for both entrepreneurs and investors. Why is Africa the next frontier market?
Thank you for your question. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nefey Etomi. I work at Paystack. So there are a couple of reasons why Africa is the next frontier. I'll start with investors and then I'll talk about entrepreneurs. So for investors, I think the first obvious reason is total addressable market. Nigeria and Africa at large is very huge, 1.4 billion people, 17% of the world population, and it's an undertapped market. So one could say it's common sense for it to be the next frontier. And another thing with Africa is a lot of the things being built, you could argue are basic. They're not nice to have. They're essential things that we need. So you know that people will use these products. You're building real products for real people, solving real problems, and you'll get your returns. And it helps that there have been quite a few exits. So we had Sendwave was acquired by World Remit. We had Bionic.
And we mentioned Paystack.
And Paystack. And this encourages investors to come into the market because they've seen people who have taken the risk get their reward and encourages them to do the same. And it's a cycle because as an entrepreneur, if you see people taking the plunge and going for their ideas and they're getting the investment they need, you get the courage you need to go forward as well. This is purely my opinion and not data backed at all. But I also think that there's been a social shift. Few of us are being forced to be doctors and lawyers, and therefore people are actually going after their passion and they're solving problems in their immediate environments. And I think that's boosting entrepreneurs to spring up more because you're not being forced to do a degree that you don't want to do, or is less frowned upon to do that degree and pivot to do something else. I have a lot more to say, but I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you very much for that response. My next question is to you, Mr. Olu. So you are the president and co-CEO of one of Africa's unicorn startups, right? What does it take to build a $1 billion company? And where do you think the next $1 billion startup will come from?
Thank you, Victor. Let me correct the description. I'm the CEO of Opay Nigeria. Opay Nigeria is part of the larger Opay group. So Opay group is the unicorn. Of course, Nigeria is a very big part of that. Yeah. We should have announced it. Opay is in several countries: Egypt, Pakistan, Indonesia, Mexico, Peru, Colombia. And Opay Nigeria is a big part of that. So in terms of the question, in terms of learning from Opay, a couple of things stands out, which is, I'll pick from what Nefey said. There has to be identify a real market need, a problem that is not being solved. In our case, we recognize the large issue of excluded population from financial services, particularly at the very early days through agency banking. Now, when you pick your space, recognize that the space can close quickly. You probably have maybe a short 2-3 year window. If you have the right product market fit, focus on it, amass resources, and run very fast. Because ultimately, in this market, scale matters. And in many sectors, there's probably a space for only 2 or 3 players. So if you are coming as a fourth, even when you are good, you may not make it. So get the right product market fit, run very fast, and scale. And in terms of the opportunities, we would like to say that the opportunities in terms of the excluded population in Nigeria is not yet closed and across Africa. 50% will be very interested to see what the FINA will say when the 2022 data is published. But we'll bet that at least 45% of Nigerians, despite all that players like Opay has done, will still be excluded. So there's still a lot of opportunities in the underserved, excluded markets. Then we believe that the merchant space is huge because in Nigeria we have 41 million MSMEs. A lot of these people need acceptance solutions, online and offline, where Paystack and Opay plays. Probably we've only served, at the best, 500,000 of them. The opportunities to scale merchant acceptance is huge, and the prosperity will create for a lot of our MSMEs. Riding on that, of course, is the financing that comes with merchant financing and scaling that. We believe these are the directions in terms of the next set of billions, and it's very interesting to see a whole lot of players out there who are trying to solve these problems of the last mile financial rail, merchant payments, and merchant financing. These are big opportunities out there. We are there, Opay is committed to it, and we will build the rail to support many more players to get what they want to do done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Tolu, the fintech landscape in Africa and in Nigeria, has witnessed significant milestones. This is a very cheesy question to ask, but why is fintech popular?
So I would say that if you look at the way, human life is structured, our basic needs are food, shelter, then you start to aspire for a career, a job, a business. And, at the center of all of this is finance, which means that you're looking to get money, you're looking to transfer money, you're looking to save money or to maximize what you have earned. And that means that, somehow you have to deal with money at some point. That brings me to, fintech in a way. So I would say if you look at what life was pre-2000, you would have to go to a bank to cash your check. You'd have to go to a bank to pay your school fees. If you were in uni and then your parents need to send you money, they'll probably put the money in an envelope with the driver sent to school. a lot of financial transactions were cash based. Even getting a loan from a bank was probably difficult because they had to do like months of due diligence looking at your reports in paper. And so around 2000s, with the internet being something that became more popular, especially in Africa, and people getting access to mobile phones, finance was something that had to change. So first, from us being able to pick up a mobile phone and talk to people, it now became, oh, we were able to transfer money. I'm not even going to talk about when Paystack came. I'm going to talk about when you could deposit check at the bank and then clearing became faster because we built some infrastructure to enable, settlements from 20 days to 3 to 5 days. And that was something that had direct impacts on people. Like you said, solving real problems. With that, other people started to get into the space. Oh, how have we done financial transactions? What needs to change? Consumers started to have like different demands. So why should I go to the bank to queue if there's a solution that can enable me do this from the comfort of my homes? And those were problems that people started to solve. So from being able to transfer money effortlessly to being able to apply for a loan on an app like Branch and get the loan delivered to your bank account in less than 10 minutes, things started to change and people started to see like, oh, we can actually solve problems. We can disrupt this financial space. We can change the way financial services is delivered, how it's delivered, and where it's delivered to. So from us not going to bank where, we're able to access financial services over what's it called, websites and then now mobile apps, to the way investments are made, which is what companies like what's it called, Piggyvest, Bamboo are doing, where we have access to different financial services, different to foreign stocks that we would never have dreamed of. So I think that those things became more interesting. You could also see the results. You could see the impacts on people. You could see the way. So, for example, someone that has a store, Shodi Markets, that used to carry his cash to banks before, but now has an agent pick it up and then it's reflected on his account immediately. Those things just made it easier for people to say, okay, this is something we're interested in. And like you said, Africa is a market of 1.4 billion. The average age is about 19 to 20. We have a young populace. And these people are interested in stuff like this. So it also means that, oh, there's a problem that needs to be solved. People are solving it. Investors are saying that. And that's why, everyone seems to be coming down to, fintech in Africa. Like I said, finance is central to our way of life. So anything that improves finance, improves access to finance, disrupts finance, is something that investors will largely interested in. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. The next question that I want to ask, I believe, is something everybody here grapples with. And we discussed this a lot, especially in Twitter, Nigeria. We have enough fintech players in the industry. Today is Opay, tomorrow is Piggy Bank, tomorrow is Paystack, tomorrow is Flutterwave. And at some point, it feels like everyone is doing the same thing, but marketing it in a different way, right? We have so many startups coming up, here and there. But then at some point, we users, I believe we all have more than one fintech app on our phone. I, for one, have like 5. And at the end of the day, I only use like 1 or 2, right? But then you hear this exciting thing comes up from this startup or this person. So my question to you, Nefey, is this. What would you say is currently the most exciting thing about, the fintech world currently? And for you at Paystack, Paystack is one of the leading fintech startups in Africa. What are you guys planning to do that we don't know of yet?
I signed an NDA.
And how do you see the landscape evolving again over the next 5 years? Will we have many more players, or would people start to, merge together? Just like what is happening between banks and fintechs now, they are now more or less working together instead of working, as rivals. How do you see that playing out?
Okay. You asked me 3 questions. Okay. First question, in terms of what excites me the most about the fintech space, I honestly think it is the opportunity. Like 6 years ago, we couldn't use our cards to pay for things online. I think we're in a generation where we're used to things happening quickly, that I'm glad Oluwole touched on the transition, but there's so much to be done. And even though we have solutions now, none of them are actually perfect. Like, it's still very hard to use your Nigerian card to pay for things online, for example. We haven't hacked QR codes. Like, there's a lot more to be done. and there's definitely a lot more room for collaboration. I think the market is so nascent, and we have, yeah, like the opportunities are honestly endless, and we have a huge market to satisfy that. But I think also one thing we forget is the only problem that we have really solved so far is payments within within the country and within Nigeria. We still need to be able to do things within Africa, and then we need to connect Africa to the rest of the world. So fintech is so exciting because we have only just scratched the surface, and there's so much more to do. There's definitely a case for oversaturation in the ecosystem. Yes, there are lots of players, but like I said, there's no concrete solution yet. We're all doing a great job, but there's still so much work to be done. And yes, maybe there'll be acquisitions along the line. Maybe people can even pivot. But if you look at more mature markets, they all started off with the same. They start off the same way. You get a lot of people trying to solve a problem, and then the bigger players emerge. I think also fintech is, like, McKinsey released a report in 2020 where they mentioned that most fintechs actually focus on payments and lending. There's still insurance. Like, I realized recently that most people can't even get insurance for their parents because regular insurance companies cap it at a certain age. There's still like market intelligence. Like there's so many different areas, even investment management and capital management. I know we have like Bamboo and RiseVest, but there's still so many different areas of fintech that are unexplored. And yeah, I think there's room for growth. Also, a lot of the fintechs right now focus on consumers. You don't actually have a lot of people focusing on like SMEs and big corporates. Most big companies still have to like do invoices and everything. They don't have the smart options that we have. So there's a lot of room, and I think that makes the case for there being a lot of players. To answer your question of what Paystack is doing next, I'm not
Because
that
Paystack has
privileged.
been somewhat under the radar now, especially in the media. It's like you guys are doing some background operations. What is going on at Paystack?
There's
Something
a lot going
exciting.
on. There's a lot going on. We're definitely focusing a lot in Nigeria as well as expanding to new markets. It's not a secret that we're expanding to new markets, but Nigeria is the reason why we're successful. It's the biggest market share that we have, and we want to continue to grow that because, like I said, the solution here is not perfect, and we don't want to forget our home markets in an attempt to grow. But I think to answer your very last question, I believe that fintech is part of a three-part solution. So we have payments, and we have e-commerce. Obviously, most things we're paying for is to buy things online. I think the very obvious gap is logistics. We haven't figured out how to transport things within the country, within the continent, and outside. And I feel like what we might get is some of those players either trying to work across that value chain or pivot into one or the other. Or, like I said, there's so much to be done. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sir, I'd like to pick your brain, based on your experience in corporate leadership. First of all, I would like to hear from you, your own personal perspective. Why do you think we have so many players in the industry? And at the same time, we have so many players, like she mentioned, some of them, they get acquired at the end of the day. Some of them would end up merging with the bigger, industry giants. For some founders here or for some entrepreneurs here who are looking to rise to the unicorn level status, right? What advice do you have for them?
I think the first question you asked about, we have many apps, we tend to play in the same spaces.
And all of
I
you
think
offer the same services.
you are asking a question which I would say is a question of conscience for all of us. We're having a conversation at the exhibition stands. If at the end of the day, despite all the opportunities, all that we all do is to serve and share the same kind of customers among ourselves, we probably would not have solved the problem of inclusion in Nigeria. So there are two sets of problems, the underserved and the excluded. I think one of the challenges for our ecosystem is that how do we ensure that in terms of providing new type of services for the underserved who are already served, it does not disproportionately take the whole of our resources such that we forget that Nigeria is not Lagos. There's Benin Kebbi in northern Nigeria. There is Brass in riverine south of Nigeria, where there are no access to services. How do we build the financial rail? Because the true size of Nigeria is beyond Lagos, even though, of course, there's prosperity in Lagos. So these are some of the patriotic questions that we face. How do we create a fintech community whose valuation in terms of unicorn valuation is also commensurate with the social impact on the people of Nigeria? And that's where the space of, for us at Opay, for example, we see large opportunities of MSMEs. Yes, we are building on the consumer rail. I like the way Nefey has put it. We are playing on the consumer rail, but on the merchant side, there's huge opportunities to create or empower the micro-entrepreneur that are pervasive all over Africa, all over Nigeria, with opportunity. If we bring financial rail to them, they will connect to markets and they become more prosperous. That's one of the things that we want to do. Getting back to the question you asked again about, everyone should innovate, but we need to cooperate with ourselves in many ways. I think I will talk about that later. It's one of the things I want to talk about because you can't solve all problems. You need to find people who complement what you do so that we can unlock value together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So currently, due to the ongoing crisis that has, pretty much affected a lot of people, the ecosystem itself, the startup ecosystem, has been impacted by, the low level of funding. There's been a slowdown recently. But then again, there's this argument that it has actually created more opportunities and more, it has opened more doors for more people to launch or set up something new. So my question to you, Tolu, is from your position, right, what do you think are the opportunities that currently exist now in the ecosystem, especially for the founders and entrepreneurs who are listening?
That's a very tricky question. And again, this is my personal view. I think with the raises, exits in the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a bit of hubris on the side of investors and on the side of founders. So sometimes you see some decks that just doesn't really tell the full story. You see investors that are willing to sign a check without doing their technical due diligence. And then, 2 years later, you're like, okay, this is not what I signed up for. So now that there's a bit of death and, you know that funding is a bit, there's a bit of scarcity, I think it would distinguish the serious founders from the not too serious founders. So now is the time to distinguish yourself. Now is the time to show the work that you've done. Now it's the time to prepare, to put in relevant facts, data, insights into your deck. Now it's the time to show that, okay, or maybe to even reevaluate the products that you're building and the team that you have. Are we, what's the end game here? What are we trying to do? What can we do better? Or should we even be collaborating with another startup and then, launching a bigger, using that as a bigger platform to solve the problem that we're looking to solve? So I think that would be, what I would, if I was sitting across a founder right now, I'd be like, this is the time to distinguish yourself. There's still, there might be a dearth of funding, but there's still investors, the VCs and, private equity funds that have raised funds that have limited lifetime and need to disperse. But they are just going to, they're going to be doing a little bit more due diligence that they've done. They're going to ask you more questions and they need to be sure that, it's not like they're asking you to show that your investment or your company is foolproof, but they also need to, to see some level of certainty, just in terms of the work that you've done, insights that you have, research that you've done with customers and all of that. Yeah, that'd be my advice.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, I think one of the things that it will be important in terms of for funders, and if you come into a space where there are others, some of the rules of old of traditional industry still applies. How are you going to be different? What's unique about what you are bringing to the market? Because if what you are bringing is just like everybody's, eventually it will mean that what you will end up doing is price competition, we all destroy value, and we don't create value for our investors. So some of those issues around what am I doing differently? Am I serving a different kind of customer? Am I offering a different product, a different kind of differentiation are important as it is in traditional industries and is also in tech. Thank you.
Yeah, I was
Can
actually
I
going
just,
to.
I just remembered something. And so on this panel already, I think we have mentioned at least 2 or 3 different areas that the surface has barely been scratched. And I think those are areas that, if you're a serious founder, you should be looking at. So like you said, well, so quite a number of the fintechs, especially in certain spaces, are looking at people that have been banked. So they're probably underserved. And they were not looking at, the people that are in certain areas of Nigeria or offering certain types of goods. Those are, you should be looking at that space, those spaces that have not been served, or that, looks like, there might be some sweet spots there. I think, we already on this panel, we've mentioned at least 2 or 3 of them. I won't mention them. I was hoping that, you would have listened and you'd have got some of the opportunities in those spaces. Thank you.
Yeah, again, I still feel like many of us here would like to know more options. What are the things that, many of them can do, to give them an edge, over their competitors? It's an open question to both of you. Apart from what has been mentioned, right, I still feel like there are more things that, in your position, from your experience, you believe can make others stand out. Because we have a lot of fintech startups that pretty much offer the same thing, like you rightly said, but it's just their marketing that they are, leveraging on to acquire the customers. So, in practical terms, this time around, what should these people do to stand out?
Why me? Okay, so in practical terms, one, you really need to identify your problem and test it. A lot of us sit down in our rooms and just say, oh, this is a problem. Is it a real problem? How many people is it affecting? Test your solution. Like, does your solution actually work? You can try it out on a small scale. And I think something we haven't really talked about yet is the support that you need. Because you can actually have the best idea with the best team, but you don't have the right support. So that's when sponsors come in, mentors come in, people that can mention your name in the right places, put money into your business, put you in front of the right people. And that's why coming for events like this works. So be sure to network, and you never know who will support you, either as a co-founder or, like I said, as a mentor or a sponsor. I think those are some practical things that you can do.
So I don't know if you have any other thing to add.
The other one, of course, will be, we talked about being different so that you are not a commodity and compete on price. The other one is, of course, the support. The other one that is important is there's always a narrow space, a window in every space. It's probably about a year or 2. If you find the right, you cannot scale. First, you can't scale if you don't have the right product. So a lot of time needs to be spent in terms of finding the right product, because you put a lot of energy and marketing resources on the wrong product, you won't get results. After that, if you get it, then just run, and run very fast. But I can't overemphasize the issue of ensuring that you're either serving a market that is not served. I like the way to put it. A market that is not served. And if you are competing in a market that's been served, what are you bringing that is different? It needs to be clear to the consumer. And you need to bring what they call think from outside. How would the customer that you are targeting see that product from outside? Is it something different? I think with that and with scale, then with a great product, there's scale is the next thing.
Thank you very much, Sam. I don't know if you have any other thing to add, or we can move on. Great. So still on the topic of the next tech frontier, right? There is something growing amongst the younger generation. We have a lot of body conversations around the metaverse, the AI, the blockchain, cryptocurrency, and all of that. And many of the fintech startups, the established fintech startups that we know of, are doing their best to adopt, some of these technologies into what they offer their clients or their customers. So again, this is an open question. How do you guys see the landscape evolving in terms of the adoption of these technologies? And how do you think is going to benefit the average user on the long term?
Okay. So basically, opportunities, to summarize. Okay. So I think that it gives us, so we've talked a lot about helping the unbanked, and I think this is one way that it can potentially be done, but most importantly, it gives you the room to be innovative. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't want to offend anyone that works in a bank here, but banks are big, and the consequence sometimes of being big is that you're slow to react to your environments. So I think we're reaching a stage where banks can't necessarily support the life that we're currently living. And I think it gives people the opportunity to be innovative with their solutions. A lot of it helps with the devaluation of currencies as well. If you have another field by which you can express value. And I think the issue, I know you didn't ask me about issues, but I think the issue that we face with realizing these opportunities right now is that we have the tendency sometimes to shut down what we don't know. And I'm not saying there are not risks to crypto and like the metaverse and all of these things, but the way I see it is, for example, let's say you build a very wide, straight, smooth road. Some people will take the piss and they'll start speeding and, drag racing and everything. The response to that is not now to scatter the road and destroy it and say, okay, since people are not treating it properly, bad roads for everyone. No, you put speed cameras in place, you set up speed limits, you put enforcers there, and you make it work for everyone. And I think that's what we should be doing, is rather than just banning it, there are ways to support it. Like look at Dubai, for example. They've actually reduced their transaction fees and encouraged a lot of the payments to happen within. It's created an entirely new revenue stream for them. There's no reason why we can't do that. And I know we're looking into that here where the SEC has now put in fees, but putting in fees just actually alienates people. And again, you're now, the people who could have come in that didn't have the opportunity, you've alienated them for a potential new entry that they could have had. And then you have CBN that bans things altogether. So these two regulators aren't even coming up with similar rules, which is just sending confusing messages and is not particularly encouraging. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but until we address the challenges, those opportunities are never going to be realized.
Yeah, I will add that one of the things we should do in tech is to engage our regulators more with a little bit of more open mind. I think our regulators, since we need them, and I like the way she put it, what you don't understand, you don't want to touch. The solution to that will be to work with our regulators with empathy, to try and understand where they are coming from. And in terms of some of the innovations that we want to put into the market, if our regulators feel we understand them, then we can constructively also engage them on the basis of we know where you are coming from. In fact, where you are coming from, this is how we think it could be solved, and this is another perspective. I think sometimes our regulators may feel that we do not, because we're in tech, we do not have, essentially what I'm trying to say is that deal with regulation and regulators with more emotional intelligence will be the way to engage our regulators and not to stand from, we are tech, we know it, You guys don't know it. Right from that posture, we lose the sympathy of the guys who are going to regulate the roads. So we need to raise the standard of emotional intelligence in the tech community to engage our regulators. I think around there, we will get the right empathy from them for some of the innovative things that we want to do. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. I was just going to say that, what Mr. Akong said is like very spot on. So I had legal and compliance at branch, and one of, my key responsibilities is liaising regulators. And to be honest, yeah, I must say that if you, especially if you're in the finance space, banking, financial services has always been regulated. You will always have a regulator, and you're not likely to be more powerful than your regulator. Understanding that from day one, even when you're at the stage where you're still thinking about your idea, helps you to think about how to communicate and engage with your regulators. If you know that this is an institution that's here, will probably be here if whether or not I succeed in this business. It helps you understand and think about creative ways to engage the regulators. I would say that relationship with regulators has actually, significantly improved in Nigeria. Way better than it was years ago. They understand that they're fintechs, they understand that they're these companies, they're key to use this product, they use this product one way or the other, so they know that you exist. But like you said, some of these things they don't understand and they'd rather not touch it. It now depends on the way you approach them. I've seen one or two tech companies that have approached regulators to say, let's do a capacity building session with your team. Let's take them through what we're building. Let's take them through how the market is using this technology. And that's also helped. If they're going to issue regulations on that matter next week, they will call on that company because they remember that, it was these guys that taught us through these things. And I'd also say that, with new technology, like you said, so for example, our branch uses artificial intelligence, which is machine learning, in terms of credit scoring and assigning a loan to you. And that's new technology. I imagine that if we had walked up to CBN 7 or 8 years ago to say, this is how we're going to do our credit assessments, they would have looked at us and said, no, that's not how banks do credit assessments. You can't do that. But somehow, they've sort of accepted that this exists. And I think that's the way we should be dealing when we think about cryptocurrency, metaverse, omnichannels, how that's going to impact finance and, the regulation of these things in the next years.
Thank you very much. So speaking on the topic of regulation, if you could change one policy about how startups or fintech startups operate, what policy would you change and why?
I'll give. See, in many instances, because on the innovation side, the things that we do from a regulatory perspective will, especially if you are pushing the boundaries, will look perceptively risky. And the tendency of regulation, in fact, the mandate of regulation sometimes is standards, let's control, let's have stability. So you now have that interesting tension between tech players who are pushing the boundaries into unknown spaces where the rules have not been extended. Rules have to be created. The players are inventing the rules. And on the regulatory side, we are saying that this is a standard. So the tension between the standards of regulation and the innovators who are getting to what will be considered risky. So it's always a tension. So I will still say go back to the, and I think I must commend the regulators in Nigeria. Many of them are very smart. CBN colleagues, CBN regulators are extremely very smart. I think they do listen very well. I think we have seen them do a lot of progressive things over the last few years. Some of the new licenses they have issued to create competition, to create innovation, suggest regulators, and some of the open papers like open banking they are putting in place, which is the first in Africa, suggest regulators that are looking ahead. We just need to continuously engage them. And also recognize their own limitations, because our regulators too are also answerable to some other super regulators that we don't see. So the question of emotional intelligence, when we're engaging them, is also to think about what exactly, when we finish this meeting, who will this regulator go and talk to? And how do we make sure that it's not looking like it doesn't know what it's doing? So that empathy from ourselves, thinking together, and also putting prosperity of Nigeria first, include prosperity of Nigeria first, I think will be the way to go. I think we at Opay, we will continue to work very closely with our regulators. We love what they do. It's not perfect, but we think they are continuously open to engaging with us.
Thank you very much, sir.
So I would say it's worth remembering that you can't do one size fits all. And I'm going to answer this question from an expansion perspective. So when I was in business school, one big thing we always used to talk about when it came to regulation was ask for forgiveness, not permission. And it's just like move fast and break things, which is, Uber's model. And I think there's a time and a place for that. And one thing we always look at before we go into a new market, regardless of the size of the market and their GDP and the market needs, is the regulatory landscape. There are some countries where that's okay. Sometimes your home country, you have enough of a reputation with the regulator that you can afford to ask for forgiveness and not permission, but you go somewhere new and you've shot yourself in the foot for that. So it's always worth knowing very, very well. And these days, like, news travels fast. If you mess up in one market, it can actually hinder you going into multiple markets. And there are 54 countries on this continent that we're trying to break into. So I think it's very, very important to really know and understand the regulatory landscape that you're going into, get local opinions, like seek counsel that's local, hire people locally, and just take that into consideration when you're moving forward. It's also different for different products as well. Like Oluwole said, the fintech finance space has always been very regulated, and sometimes as things get more decentralized, it gets riskier. There's more room for like fraud and everything, which is bad for the economy and for your business. So it's important to know which products you also need to kind of put a regulatory hat, think about the ways it can be exploited, and mitigate against that in your building of the product as well. It's not just for the regulators to pull you back. If you consider that as you're building the product, there'll actually be less tension between you and the regulatory body of the country that you're going into.
Thank you very much for that. Tolu, from a legal perspective.
So your question was one thing we could change about
One
policy.
thing,
So I think I've had some time to think about this, and I think that one thing that would be useful for regulators to change would be not to see startups, companies as a means of raising revenue. And I say that from a perspective of, I'm just starting up this business. I have to think about marketing, I have to think about different things. And then you say the minimum share capital is something million. And I have to get this license and I have to pay something million, or it's a percentage of my share capital. And I totally understand and recognize that sometimes this is necessary because you also want to use that some sort of barrier to entry because it's financial services space. But I think that it shouldn't be looked at as a means of raising revenue for the relevant agencies. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So to just wrap up, I would love for two people in the audience, if they have any questions, kindly raise your hands. No questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in for this wonderful session. We have come to the end, and I believe everyone was engaged. Everyone had an amazing time listening to these distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much for coming once again, and we have now come to the end of this session. Thank you.
Thank you.